You're 11 years old. It's a raw, unseasonable spring, and you don't know yet that this loss will follow you for the rest of your life. Your father is dead. Not recently, long enough that grief's already turned into responsibility. Long enough that his older son, your half-brother, has inherited the best of it. Mount Vernon, the river frontage, a name that already means something in Virginia. You get the lesser share, smaller farms, scattered acres administered by your mother until you're grown, while the family's finest estate passes over you entirely. You get a widowed mother who runs the household like a small, tired army, and a future that depends entirely on how well you can hold a survey chain, a sword, or your own tongue. You don't know yet that you'll lose a battle so badly the enemy lets you walk away just to embarrass you. You don't know yet that you'll cross a frozen river on the one night in the year nobody expects an army to move. You don't know yet that one day you'll hold more power than any man on this continent has ever held, and that the single most important thing you ever do is hand it back. Here's what nobody tells you about becoming George Washington. You're a teenager now, and you've learned the first hard rule of your world. Land is everything, and you don't have enough of it. Your older half-brother got Mount Vernon, the good soil, the river frontage, the family name stitched into every beam. You got a surveyor's compass and a horse that's seen better decades. So you do what ambitious young men with no inheritance do in 1750s Virginia. You go make yourself useful to people who have what you want. You survey land nobody's mapped. You learn to read terrain like other boys read scripture, and when the colonial governor needs someone reckless enough to march into contested territory and deliver an ultimatum to the French, guess whose name comes up? You're barely out of your teens when you're leading men into the Ohio country. It goes badly, there's a skirmish, a hasty fort thrown up with the unfortunate name Fort Necessity, and a surrender, your surrender, signed in French, a language you don't fully read, agreeing to language that makes you sound like an assassin, humiliating, public, the kind of failure that would end most young men's ambitions on the spot. You don't quit. A few years later, you're riding beside British General Braddock when his expedition gets torn apart in the wilderness. Horses shot out from under you, bullet holes in your coat. You survive when men beside you don't. People start whispering that you might be protected by something. You don't correct them. Then, worse than any enemy fire, a friendly fire incident during the Forbes expedition. Your own men in the chaos and the dark, firing on your own column. You watch soldiers die from your own side's mistake. It teaches you something no drill ever could, that fear and confusion kill as efficiently as the enemy does, and that a commander's whole job is preventing that chaos before it starts. By your mid-20s, you've been humiliated, nearly killed twice, and you've buried the myth that skill alone wins wars. What wins wars, you're starting to suspect, is composure. Which men have it, which men don't, and how long either can last under sustained pressure. You go home with a reputation, not spotless, but real. Mount Vernon, which started coming to you years earlier after Lawrence's death, first through his young daughter, then fully yours after his widow died in 1761, is now truly home. And a young widow named Martha Dandridge Custis, sharp-eyed, practical, sitting on a fortune left by her late husband, seems like exactly the kind of partner an ambitious man with a farm and no title could use. You marry Martha in January of 1759. You become, in the same afternoon, a husband, a landowner, and a stepfather to her 2 surviving children. You didn't expect fatherhood to arrive this way, second-hand, mid-stride. You take it anyway. You'll never have a child born to you and Martha directly, and that particular grief sits quietly under everything else for the rest of your life. For 16 years, you're a Virginia planter. A good one. A restless one. You watch the relationship between the colonies and the crown corrode a little more every season. And when Congress needs someone to lead an army that barely exists yet, they choose you, partly because you're good and partly because you're a Virginian. And a Virginian at the head of a New England army says something about unity that no one else's face could say. June of 1775. You accept command of the Continental Army. You have no idea what you've just agreed to carry. By the end of 1726, you're losing badly, publicly, repeatedly. Long Island, White Plains, Fort Washington and Fort Lee fall in the same terrible autumn, and you're retreating across New Jersey with an army shrinking by the week. Enlistments expiring, men walking home in the cold because nobody can blame them for it. Some of your own officers are quietly wondering whether you're the right man for this. You know something has to happen before the year ends, or there might not be an army left to have a next year. So you plan something almost nobody expects. Christmas night, 1776. You're going to cross the Delaware River at night in a winter storm with roughly 2,400 men and hit a garrison of Hessian soldiers at Trenton before dawn. The river's choked with ice. Boats groan under the weight of men and horses and cannon. You stand in one of those boats yourself, watching your army inch across black water in the dark, knowing that if this fails, it might be the last thing your army ever attempts together. It doesn't fail. The Hessians never see you coming. Their commander assumed no army would attack in weather like this, at an hour like this. That assumption is the gap you walk through. Your men march nearly 10 miles through snow, converge on the town, and by the time the sun's fully up, close to 1,000 Hessian soldiers have surrendered. For the first time in months, you have something to send Congress that isn't an apology. Days later, at Assunpink Creek, you leave campfires burning at Trenton, just enough to make Cornwallis believe your whole army's waiting there. While he stares at empty tents, you march the bulk of your force through the night to Princeton and hit the British garrison there too. 2 victories in the same freezing week, built on the same idea. That an enemy who believes he knows what you'll do can be beaten by simply not doing it. Morale doesn't just recover, it transforms. You've bought the revolution another year with nothing but nerve and ice water. But nerve doesn't feed an army. The following autumn brings defeat at Brandywine, and Congress flees Philadelphia while British troops move in. You march what's left of your army to a place called Valley Forge and dig in for the winter. Surviving it is not guaranteed. The huts are cold. Supply lines are unreliable at best. You write letter after letter describing men without shoes, without blankets, without enough food to stay upright in the cold. Over 6 months, disease and exposure take more than 2,000 of your men, far greater than any battlefield loss that season. You walk the camp some mornings and don't know what to say to men dying not from British muskets, but from your own government's neglect. And then a Prussian officer named Baron von Steuben arrives, speaking almost no English, and starts drilling your army from the ground up. Men who shuffled in October are marching in formation by spring. An army that nearly starved walks out of Valley Forge in June, a fundamentally different force than the one that walked in, not because of a battle, but because of a winter that should have destroyed you, and instead rebuilt you. 5 years pass, and then in early 1783, with fighting essentially over but the peace treaty still unsigned, a different kind of danger finds you, not from the British, but from your own officers. They're stationed at Newburgh, New York, and they're furious. Years of promised pay never arrived. Pensions remain unpaid. Anonymous letters circulate through camp urging officers toward a terrifying option: refuse to disband. Maybe even turn on Congress itself, an army that just won a revolution quietly discussing whether to threaten its own government. You understand immediately what's at stake: not pay, not pride, but the entire premise of what this country's supposed to be. On March 15th, 1783, you walk into the officers' assembly uninvited. You weren't asked to speak, you came anyway. You stand in front of men who've bled beside you for years and argue against what some of them are considering, turning their arms against the country you all just spent a decade breaking free for. There is no third option that isn't a betrayal. And then, mid-sentence, you stop. You reach into your coat for a pair of spectacles. New ones none of these men have ever seen you wear. Your eyes aren't what they used to be. Gentlemen, you say, you must pardon me, for I have grown grey in your service, and now find myself growing blind. You didn't plan that line to land the way it lands. It isn't a performance, it's just true, spoken out loud for the first time in front of the only men who'd earned the right to hear it. You watch hardened officers, some still holding those anonymous letters, break down in front of you. Not because of the argument, because of the eyes, because the man who's led them since Cambridge is, underneath the coat and the composure, just as worn down as they are. And stayed anyway. The vote isn't close. They reject the Newburgh addresses. Months later, the peace treaty's signed. In December of 1783, you walk into the Maryland State House at Annapolis and resign your commission, voluntarily. You hold, at that moment, more raw power than any person on this continent has ever held. An undefeated army loyal to you personally. A fractured government utterly unable to stop you if you chose otherwise. You hand it back anyway. Word reaches England that King George himself said if it were true, you'd be the greatest man in the world. You don't know if he actually said it. It doesn't change what you did. You thought you were done. You're not done. In 1789, you become the country's first president, a job that doesn't exist in any real sense until you're the one doing it. Every decision becomes a precedent. When farmers in western Pennsylvania rise up over a whiskey tax, you organize a federal response, and the authority of the young republic survives its first real domestic test. Near the end of your second term, you write, not deliver, write, a letter to your fellow citizens stepping down on purpose. Again, twice you've held the kind of power men fight wars over. Twice you've set it down before anyone had to take it from you. But you carry something else, something you don't resolve. Mount Vernon runs on the labor of enslaved people, dozens who belong to you outright, more tied to Martha's first husband's estate, people you don't even have the legal standing to free. In the last months of your life, you write a will. In it, you say the people you own should be freed, but only after Martha dies. You tell yourself this is progress. It's not simple progress. It's a debt deferred onto someone else's grief, a moral reckoning arranged for after you're no longer alive to feel its weight. December 1799. A storm rolls through Mount Vernon and you ride out in it anyway. A chill turns into a cough into a throat closing tighter by the hour. The doctors do what they believe is right. Open your veins, press blistering agents to your throat, and none of it helps, and some of it hastens what's coming. You die at Mount Vernon on the night of December 14th, 1799, 67 years old. A little more than a year later, Martha follows through on what your will asked. The people you personally owned are freed, though fewer than half the souls who worked that land, the rest still bound to Custis heirs. It's not the ending anyone deserves, it's the ending you left behind. But somewhere underneath the marble statues and the face on the money, there's still an 11-year-old boy who inherited the lesser share, who lost battles, who buried men killed by his own side's confusion, who stood in a boat on a black frozen river, betting everything on one desperate night. A man who could have been a king in every way that mattered, and instead put on a pair of glasses in front of soldiers and let them see him old and tired and human. Because that, more than any battle, was the thing that held a country together. You didn't win by being untouchable. You won by being the one man willing to hand the power back. There are a lot more lives worth stepping into from this side of history. Subscribe because we're only just getting started.